Hello, welcome to the first installment of what I hope to be a weekly series. I'm just calling it Last Week for lack of a better term. And since this is the first one, I might end up going over some topics that maybe go back even further than a week ago. But I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll be working on my video editing skills as I go along, but I'll be discussing in this segment various electric vehicle related topics or clean energy topics or whatnot, and hopefully I get my overlays working so it looks a little bit more like a real news show. And but I hope you enjoy this show today, and I'm going to try to keep the topics limited to maybe 4 or 5 things, and each one of them will be hopefully pertinent and hopefully related to, like I said, electric vehicles in general, clean power, renewable energy, and I'll be attempting to shine a little bit of light on some topics that I feel maybe don't get enough notice, or if I feel like I have a sort of unique perspective. And yeah, but please let me know in the feedbacks and comments what you think, and of course, because there might be some topics that are controversial, please keep the comments and keep the discussion civil, and just realize that we're all on the same side here, and most of us are working toward the same goals. So yeah, that's about it, and please enjoy this first segment of Last Week on News Coolum. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about is one that has gotten a lot of coverage, and so I'm only going to speak about it very briefly, but it's the Tesla Model 3 deliveries. So, despite the initial promises of quick ramp up and high volume production, Tesla only delivered 260 Model 3s in the third quarter, and that's clearly well below expectations. And so, depending on whom you listen to, the CEO of Panasonic said that it had to do with batteries being put together manually, and so the automated process at the Gigafactory wasn't up and running yet, so they were limited in how many battery packs they could produce. But then Tesla also Elon Musk also mentioned something about having to reprogram something within the Model 3 that took many man hours of software programming. So I'm not sure how that would necessarily correlate to the battery. Maybe the two are connected, maybe not. But regardless, apparently that was also to do with the slowdown. Now, like I said, I don't want to get into the details of this. It's a story that's been covered, in my opinion, almost too much, whether people are shorting Tesla or whether people are making excuses for Tesla. Either way, it doesn't matter. This sort of thing, this sort of difficulty happens in manufacturing, especially when you're trying to mass produce vehicles. The thing I wanted to emphasize, though, and this is sort of my take on it and my opinion, we all benefit from the Model 3 being on the road. People talk about how, the Model 3 is just going to crush all of the competition and it's so much better than all of the other electric vehicles. Yes and no. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. But when it comes to that sort of thing, having a high quality electric vehicle that's a no compromise electric vehicle with long range on the road, it benefits all of us, because maybe it doesn't suit everybody, and they might go and look at a Bolt EV, or they might go and look at the new Nissan Leaf that's a borderline no compromise electric vehicle coming out. So for a lot of people, 150 miles per charge is all that they'll ever need. So, but the thing is, the important thing to remember is that all of us benefit from these electric vehicles being on the road, and it builds the entire movement behind them. And then, the thing to remember is, too, when GM had sort of its slow rollout and was sort of struggling getting the Bolt EV deliveries. I personally experienced this where, I had reserved mine basically the first week that they were able to be reserved at a California dealership, and my reserved Bolt EV didn't show up with the first deliveries at the end of December. And had I not switched with a different model that had come in, I wouldn't have actually received my Bolt EV in December. I don't even actually know what happened to the original VIN for my Bolt EV. Hopefully someone else is driving it around and enjoying it. But yeah, had I not switched my reservation, I wouldn't even have received mine in 2016. Now, and a lot of what we saw online was people poking fun at GM and talking about how they aren't serious about releasing the Bolt EV and how it's just a carb compliance, zero emissions vehicle compliance car, and that they don't plan on selling very many of them. So as GM sort of struggled to get their deliveries in order and start rolling it out, you saw a lot of these online trolls coming and sort of assaulting GM or anybody who was trying to defend the Bolt EV as a product. And the thing to remember is that, a majority of Tesla owners are pro electric vehicle through and through. Unfortunately, there's a vocal few who can be trolls online, and so what I'd encourage is to don't sort of play into that, and don't treat Tesla in the same way that some of the other manufacturers who are struggling to bring electric vehicles into market. Don't treat Tesla the same way that some of the trolls have been treating those other auto manufacturers. Again, we're all in this together, and so we shouldn't be reveling in Tesla's struggles. So what we need to do is, as a community, sort of come together, and we need to encourage people who are looking to buy Tesla, but also encourage Tesla as a company to know that they're not alone trying to release these electric vehicles to market. So I think that's very important. So don't jump on the bandwagon of ha ha ha, it's promises Tesla can't keep, but instead just root for them, because we need them on the road. Okay, so the second topic I wanted to discuss is also been heavily discussed. It's throughout the news right now about the electric vehicle credit being removed with this most recent proposal for tax reform. And first I want to say I think it's important to discuss the roots of this, and this is about the most political I'm going to get on this channel, because I'm not looking to be divisive here. But when you look at what this tax reform is, it's not a partisan issue. Frankly, it's a corruption issue. So, and this is bipartisan. There are corrupt Republicans and there are corrupt Democrats, and these politicians have been receiving massive amounts of money in form of contributions and campaign donations from a few wealthy individuals, and they recently were given an ultimatum that if they didn't provide a tax cut for those wealthy individuals and shift that tax burden onto the working class and the middle class, their campaign donations, their fundraising, their contributions, their advertising that they're receiving behind the scenes through Citizens United, all of that would be cut off. So they're basically going to be cut off from a huge amount of their funding and donation if they don't push through this tax credit. And so that's why I said this isn't a partisan issue. It's purely and simply a corruption issue. And the way it's structured, essentially what it does is it's going to increase the tax burden for working and middle class, and it's going to decrease the tax burden for wealthier individuals. And one of the low-hanging fruit was the electric vehicle credit, the $7,500 credit that people could use to reduce their tax liability. And again, I must emphasize, this isn't a political issue. This isn't a partisan issue. This is purely corruption. There are billionaires who oppose this. If you talked to Elon Musk, I guarantee you he would oppose it as well. Warren Buffett has been very vocal about how it is he is a billionaire, pays more in taxes than his secretary. There are a lot of very wealthy individuals who say, no, this is bad for America, and if anything, we should be taxed more. So this isn't even a wealthy versus working class issue. This is, again, purely and simply a corruption issue. So I do urge you to, for more than just the electric vehicle credit, go ahead and call your congressman. But don't believe me alone. Go talk to your tax advisor first, and see what it would do to your taxes based on the way it's proposed. But that being said, the tax credit itself, I do think it's problematic. I don't want to see it end because it's really the only thing leveling the playing field because of the amount of subsidies and the amount of additional incentives that are going to fossil fuels. There's really nothing else for electric vehicles on the federal level anyway. Some states have very strong state support for electric vehicles, but not on the federal level. So I do think it's important, but it does eventually need to be revised because it doesn't actually do what it's intended to do. It's a regressive credit that isn't applied at the point of sale. So you have to be middle class or above for it to really matter. Even if you're making $40,000 to $50,000 a year, the likelihood that you can take advantage of the full $7,500 credit is very, very slim. So it really doesn't help lower income people get into electric vehicles unless maybe they're leasing, and that's really the only time it actually helps. Now, in terms of what would happen if this credit gets removed, it actually hurts the procrastinators in the industry more than, I guess, the new big three in terms of electric vehicle manufacturers, which is GM, Tesla, and Nissan. They're going to be hurt the least by it. Companies like Mazda are going to be hurt the most because what's going to happen is they're going to be forced to do all of this research and development last minute and then release vehicles that are supposed to be competing against these other companies that have huge head starts, and so it's gonna be painful if they don't catch up quick. And then the other sort of silver lining to this, if it does get removed, is it could force electric vehicle makers to release more compelling electric vehicles, which in my opinion is one of the few things that's holding electric vehicles back right now. If you look across the board, there are only a couple of criteria, a couple of ways in which internal combustion engine vehicles are better. And this is from a user standpoint. This isn't even talking about economics or environment. There are a few ways in which an internal combustion engine vehicle is actually superior to an electric vehicle. So if you start to see more compelling electric vehicles on the road, they sell themselves. Even at a price difference, they're going to sell themselves. So it could actually force these automakers to start releasing more compelling electric vehicles, which will actually compel people to buy them more with or without any sort of credit or incentive. But all told, still, I feel like this is a bad time to see this credit removed, and it could stifle the development of electric vehicles, at least short term. By that I mean 2018. But all hope is not lost, right? Okay, so on to, I guess, brighter topics than that. The 2018 Bolt EV information has been released from GM, and they're discussing the new features or updates to the Bolt EV, and in a way, it's kind of disappointing because two things that people wanted to see aren't going to happen. One of them is that we know of there's no adaptive cruise control, which is a big issue, and the DC fast charging option is still an option, and it's still $750. So those are two, big issues. In terms of the changes, it's sort of weird the way GM talks about the steering wheel. Apparently, the heated steering wheel is now going to be automated, so you're not actually turning it on and off, but it's going to turn on based on a few different factors such as cabin temperature. And then the other thing is, if you have an LT, and I find this funny right now because I still have brochures from Lowell Observatory and the Grand Canyon stuck in the back pocket behind the passenger seat of my Bolt EV LT, but apparently that pocket is going to be deleted from the seat. Now, again, these are the options that they're talking about, or the changes that they're talking about. So yeah, the deleted pocket is sort of an odd thing to say, but and maybe this is just my being an eternal optimist, I still wonder about the seats themselves, because GM has received a good amount of feedback about the seats, and people are disappointed. I would say a good portion of people are disappointed. So it tells you how compelling the Bolt EV is as a vehicle, when it seems like about 20 to 30% of the people, maybe as high as 40% of the people who bought the Bolt EV had issues with the seat at the time that they bought it. And so the rest of the vehicle is so compelling that even if the seats weren't completely comfortable, people were buying it anyway. Now, the reason I bring that up is the seats aren't really a feature. And if GM decided to go through and add a 1/4 inch of padding to the seats, that would reduce the number of people complaining that I've seen by about half. If they were to restructure the seats and actually make them wider, even by 1/2 inch, that would reduce almost all of the complaints I've seen about the seats. And again, those aren't really features. So I'm kind of curious whether they would include that in the 2018 Bolt EV update. And part of the reason for it too is, if people are on the fence and the seats are what's on the fence, but a good portion of them are still buying the car, GM might not want to say whether they're updating the seats or not. And the reason for that is it could make people wait. So if they're trying to move more vehicles now rather than waiting for 2018, they might want to, keep hush about any changes to the seats. I don't know. But like I said, that's maybe just, my being a bit optimistic. And then, there have been a few other pieces of pretty good Bolt EV news. Actually, it was the #1 best-selling plug-in vehicle in October, passing everybody, and this includes plug-in hybrids, which is quite a feat. And then, to me, the thing is, if you look at the post-50 state rollout, the average numbers are pushing well above 30,000 domestic sales a year. So for a car that's just launched and has had some delivery issues and other problems too, it's selling extremely well. So it's not likely to be the #1 best-selling electric this year, because the Model S still has a bit of a lead on it. But it's going to come close, and it might outsell the Prius plug-in, which is crazy. So yeah, I think the Bolt EV is doing extremely well now, despite, I think, some of the criticisms about the rough sort of launch that we had. And then the other really good Bolt EV news that's also, I think, kind of fascinating is Consumer Reports released that they just ranked the Bolt EV as GM's most reliable vehicle. That's pretty cool. I mean, GM has been getting better in recent years, but the report also shows that like Buick is sort of dropping off, and some other auto manufacturers are actually improving in terms of their reliability. But the fact that GM is basing 20 new cars off the technology that they put in the Bolt EV, you could be seeing a fleet of extremely reliable cars coming out of GM in the next 5 years. That's a big deal. And the fact that they're electric, that's a bigger deal. So yeah, that to me, that's some really good news that we're hearing. Okay, and to close this segment off, I thought I would end with what I consider some really good news. So I participate in a GM owners advisory panel where they send out surveys, and I've spoken with a few other Bolt EV owners about it, but the most recent survey that they sent out was very interesting, to say the least, especially on the heels of the news that they're going to be releasing 20 electric vehicles in the next 5 years. One of the early questions that they asked that just so cool is how valuable is towing to you with your electric vehicle? Well, very. So the fact that they asked it means that it's on their radar. So hopefully this means that they're going to start looking to produce electric vehicles with towing packages soon. I mean, even the Bolt EV, it's a 3,500-pound car with 200 horsepower. It actually can tow if you needed it to. So what's holding it back, whether they need to reinforce the transmission or gearing, and I mean really transmission is a gear, or add like a radiator of some sort to remove excess heat that builds up, whatever it is they need to do, or remap or reprogram the motor so it can actually accept towing 1,000, 1,500 pounds, do it because it's a very important feature. But it's some of the other numbers from this survey, and they asked a series of questions and preferences, and some things I just didn't even care about. Like they were talking about price relative to incentives and the equivalent internal combustion engine vehicle, and those things weren't really considerations for me. But one number that piqued my interest is, what do you think about a 400-mile range electric vehicle? I think a lot, actually. The fact that all of the vehicles really that they were kind of getting a grasp around were 200 to 400 miles in range, it shows you where GM is right now, what they're thinking about. They're thinking about electric vehicles that might not actually need to rely on a fast charging network. That's important, because now you're talking about going 400 to 500 miles. Most people don't drive that in a day. Even on long trips, they won't drive that. So now all of a sudden, you shift the burden from fast chargers to destination chargers. That's game changing. The other thing is they talking about fast charging. What do you think about getting 200 miles of range in 15 minutes? I wouldn't mind. That's a 200 kilowatt charging rate, essentially, if you average out what a typical electric vehicle is going to see. So GM is trying to weigh that. Some of the other questions were about battery fade expected within 3 years. How much percentage of a capacity would you be willing to lose in 3 years as a trade-off? But just the fact that they're considering 200 kilowatt charging, that's a big deal. The other thing is they mentioned 4-second 0 to 60 times. you don't need 4 seconds 0 to 60 times, but the fact that one of the cars that they sort of had under a little car cover in the background as they were releasing the story looked like a Camaro. I think a 4-second 0 to 60 speed electric Camaro would turn some heads, and it would be what I was saying earlier, compelling. And then, of course, just all of these sort of combined. Like I said, there was a series of questions. I don't know, based on my agreement with the GM owner advisory panel, whether I can release any of that information for the, in terms of the questions specifically what they were asking. But I think it gives us a very good idea about where their mind is and where they're going with these electric vehicle plans. And I'll tell you, from what I've seen, I like it. So anyway, let me know what you think. Again, welcome to discuss all of these issues. Just be civil about it, and I think we can all start moving forward together a little bit better, and stop fighting amongst ourselves as electric vehicle owners or prospective electric vehicle owners. We're all on the same side, and so sort of a concerted effort to start pushing these things forward. And I'll tell you, like I said, I wanted to close on a high note because I think this last week has had some very good news.